Trevelyan, owner and founder of Sarah Loves to Sew, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute little Easter bunny. So this is the project for the Beginner's Sewers box, and we are making this plushy, fleecy, little cute bunny with his little pom-pom tail. So here's how we're going to do it. So take your pattern out of your box and with your paper scissors cut out the different shapes. So you'll have one of the front, one of the back and one of the tail. Once you've cut the templates out, you need to line it up on your fabric. So once you've cut out the template and you've placed the template on top of the fleece, which is double, so it's folded over, you can cut two of the back and two of the front. So you can cut them with either your fabric scissors that have the nice flat edge along the bottom so that you can hold it steady and cut along, or you can cut it with a rotary cutter, and I use the little rotary cutter just to do the little angles and sometimes finish off with other scissors. So you want to start, I also use weights to weight it down before I cut. Or you can pin it to the fabric. So you cut the shapes out, and then once you've cut both shapes out, we will move on to the next step. So once you've cut out the two fronts and the two backs, use the surplus bit of fabric and cut out the tail. So I've just pinned this one to it to cut it out. And then we're going to start sewing the darts for the bunny. So for the dart on the front here, again you just line up the raw edges to cut there. You cut out your little triangle, and then you can take a ruler and draw it, or you can do it by eye. So you're going for about 1 centimetre above the gap and a good 6mm seam allowance. So you just sew along that. Like so, and then you'll have the front side. You can see it's having some shaping there with the dart, and we do the same on the back of the bunny. So it doesn't really matter which way round you use this fleece, it's totally personal preference. So if you want this to be the inside, you need to make sure that you have the seams lined up the right way. So we're going to sew the darts in exactly the same way on the back of the bunny. So where you've got this triangle cut out here, you can put your seams together, your edges together, like so, and either take a pen or just hold where you want to start, so it'll be about 1 centimetre up from the gap, and then you'll be sewing a line along here. So if you like, and you've got a fabric pen, you can use that, or you can just do it by eye. I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine. So I'm going to sew it from there and finish about here. Just do a few reverse stitches to start it off. There we go. And then you do the same, exactly the same on the other side of the bunny, but just make sure that you have the two pieces opposite. So one will be facing this way with the right side like this, and the other one will be facing the other way. So once you've sewn all 4 darts, you should have your 2 front pieces and your 2 back pieces and the tail. So we're going to leave the tail to last. And now what I want you to do is take the 2 front pieces, and so these are the sort of slightly smaller ones, and I'm going to sew them together. So you put right sides together, so make sure you've got the right sides by checking where the darts are, and you're going to sew these 2 together down the front. So you will need to sew them, put them together like that, and then we'll sew them together. Okay, so you can either use pins or wonder clips, whatever you prefer, and we're going to just be sewing down this side here. So we'll start at the top of the head and just sew down, leaving a 6mm seam allowance, or you could go a bit more if you wanted to, 6mm to 10. Just make sure you get both sides in, because it's quite thick, this fleece to sew through. Okay, I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine. Here we are. So I'm going to just sew these together. When you get to this quite sharp section where the head and the neck meet, or the head and the body on the neck, you can put your needle down and actually just spin it a little bit, because it's quite a sharp corner there. Secure with a few reverse stitches. Now what we're going to do with these curves is we're just going to clip them, so that when we fold it out, the fabric will lie a bit flatter. So you can take your scissors and just very carefully snip, but don't snip through the stitching. So just carefully snip those notches out. And then when it's turned the right way, it shouldn't bunch so much. Okay, once you've sewn that seam, you can then start to see your little bunny taking shape. I'll just snip off these threads here. So this is his little face, which when turned the right way you can see the shaping of it, and this will be the stomach. So what we want to do now is, with our safety eyes and nose, we're going to put the face on at the front now. If you don't want to use the eyes and nose and you'd rather embroider, that's, you can do that by all means. You can take black embroidery cotton maybe or sew it, but I've got the eyes and nose, so we'll just show you how to put those on. So with the bunny nose, just find where you think you want to place it. So I've chosen this spot here. You can flatten out the seam on the back, open the seam out, and then if you run your finger down it, you can see where the top of the head is going to go and where you think his nose will look right. So for the bunny, I'm going to do it about halfway, and I'm just going to open the seam out at the back and then just push it in and then feel it on the back, and just very carefully try and get it to start to poke through. And twist it in. And then once you've got it in a little bit, you can start to push the fabric over it, and then you'll secure it on the other side with a safety backing. So you just work it in like so. So once you've started to work it through, you can just use a little scissor just to trim it slightly so it can come all the way through, and then you secure it with the backing. And you push it down, making sure that the nose is the right way, the little triangle nose with a wider part at the top. And then you place your eyes in the same fashion. So if our bunny's nose is there, I think I'm going to put one eye, just hold it and see what you think. Yeah, I think that looks a good place. And this one should be easier to poke through because it's finer. And you might need to just give it a little trim, or you might be able to just push it through. Oops, where's it gone? There it is. Oh, so it's easier, it's actually smaller in the hand. So I'm going to find a different spot for it. There we go. And then just cut a little bit through and take the little safety back and put it down that way so it cups the eye, like so. And then when you place the second eye, just make sure it's the same distance from the nose and from the middle seam, so it's nice and even. I'm just sort of eyeballing it. You can measure it if you feel more comfortable doing that. And just push it through again. If it needs another bit of help, to ease it through. Can do that. And then put the safety on it as well to push it down. Like so. So there's the little bunny face. The next thing we're going to do is sew the backs together. So in exactly the same way, put the right sides together, checking with the darts, that's the smooth side. And this time we're going to sew down the back, but we're going to leave a space to stuff the toy with. So when you're sewing it this time, you want to line up the little bits at the bottom there, and just that'll be the curve of his bottom. So you start sewing at the end of that bit and then line them all up, and we will leave a decent gap so we can get our hand in and stuff up to the head. We won't be stuffing the ears, but you'll need to be able to get to his paws and his feet as well. So just remember to leave a decent gap down the back, and reinforce by doing a few reverse stitches where you stop. And then once we've sewn the back, we're almost there. So this is a really nice, quick, easy make. So we're sewing the backs together and we're going to leave a gap. So just do a few reverse stitches and then we will finish the seam there, and then we're going to pick it up about here. So I'm going to secure it again with some reverse stitches. And again, when you get to the little neck, it's not as sharp this time, but we can still just keep your needle in, lift the presser foot and turn it so it's got a nice sharp section there. And as we did on the front, we will go back and just clip any of the curves so that the fabric will lie flat and it's turned out the right way. Check I got both sides in there because I thought I was going off a little bit. Yeah, so you can see I've not lined it up very well, and there's not much of a seam allowance on this side, so it is the shape of the back of the head, so I'm going to have to be careful. But what I will do is just go back, this time turning it this way so I can see where the end of it is. I don't want to have holes in it once we've stuffed it, so I'll just pick up on that line, a few reverse stitches, and I'm just going to bring the seam allowance in and just create a new line that encompasses a bit more of the fabric before I join on with the rest of the head. So that will at least just reinforce it slightly. So this fleece is very forgiving if you do make some mistakes. It's actually quite forgiving, and we've still got the back of the head there, so that's good. So once you've finished the back seam, just snip on any of the curves. Don't know if you really need any on the outward curve there, but just snip that one in the neck so when it's turned round it will lie a bit flatter. And then we need to sew the backs and the front together, so put them right sides together, so face down, and line up those top two seams like so and pin them together. And this is where we're going to pin and sew your bunnies together, like so. And we'll sew all the way around here. What I'm going to do actually is line up the face like this. Don't worry if it looks like one paw's slightly bigger than the other. You can trim that one. So when you sew it, to make it easier, you just trim them so that they're the same size. And likewise with the sides there. I would make sure that the body sections line up before you're lining up the ears and the arms, or the paws, should I say. Like so. Oh, I've just noticed I forgot to cut the dart in his paw here. Not to worry, you can simply, once you've pinned it all together, and again lining up the bottom main seams, working your way out from there when you pin. Like so. So if they're not exactly lined up, you can just trim off the excess and go back and sew the same dart. Just cut out a little triangle on his paw there as well. And then keep going with your pinning all the way around. Oh look, I didn't cut his dart on this side either. I'll just do that now. Cut the triangle out. And keep going all the way around. So once he's sewn together, we can just clip any of the corner curves, and that will give him a better shape when he's turned the right way round. You just sort of manipulate the fabric round till it fits. And if the paws aren't exactly lined up, it's just a lot easier when you sew to trim them so that they do. Then when you're sewing, you know you're getting the top and the bottom layer in together. Just saves you having to go back and re-stitch it like I did on the back seam there. So these are the corners that we'll be clipping: the neck corner, the joint of the arm, the little armpit and the legs. So almost pinned him together. When you're sewing the ears, do try and leave a decent gap in the middle. Don't go too close because we need to turn the ear inside out, don't forget. So that is quite tricky with this fleece. It's possible, but it can be a little bit tricky. So just bear in mind, you take your seam allowance, but don't go too generous with it on the points of the ears. Otherwise you end up having a real job of trying to turn them around. Same with this one. Just keep pinning it round. Again, if one side is slightly over the other, I just find with this fleece it's easier to trim it before you sew it, because it is forgiving, but you don't have to be exactly accurate with it. It just makes life easier. Okay, so now he's all pinned together. We're going to start sewing him. I'm going to start at the mid seam here at the top, work my way round. Okay, so off we go, sewing the two sides together. So start with a few reverse stitches and just help to feed the thickness of the fabric and the fleece through. Tight corners, you can pull up the foot and swivel it round. Remembering not to be too generous by leaving too much for seam allowance on where the ears join the head. And as you sew, just check that you've still got both layers level at the edges. So it's quite fluffy, it's difficult to always see what you're sewing, so just keep checking. And if the fleece, if you're going off track a bit, just pull up the foot, push the fleece back under, and go again. So we're coming back up to the join with the ear, so just make sure you get both pieces of fabric but still try to leave a decent space here, because we have got the double fleece to get back through. And on the tight corners, leave your needle in, put the press foot up and swivel the fabric round. Nice shape for the top of the head. Oh, it's not the top of the head, sorry, it's the side of the head here. Nice curve. Checking we've got both pieces of fabric in. It's got very fluffy, furry paws. almost halfway. She's got the leg to do. Now when you come up to the paw, I want you to stop at the dart where we're going to sew the next dart. So you stop it here. Secure your stitching. Some reverse stitching. And then we're going to start back on the other side. So this is what's going to give him his shape on his feet. So we pick up again on this side, like so. I'm just opening up that middle seam there just to make it less fabric to go through. And now we're going through the big thick fabric where we've done all the darts and the joins. So just be prepared to feed it through. Gone through quite a bunch of fabric there, quite thick. Stop at the dart on the other foot, and then we just carry on all the way around in the same manner. So we will start up on this section of the foot, making sure I'm just going to trim that so that I can see the fabric underneath. If it's too much of an overhang, you're likely to miss it. So pop that in. Again, there's a bit of an overlap here, so I'm just concerned I'm not going to get both layers in. I'll just trim it so I can see what's going on. Just get a nice curve in there. checking I've got both layers in. I'm not taking too much of a big seam allowance on the ear. Stretch now. It. So once we've sewn the front and the back together, the next thing that we need to do is the shaping of his feet. So we left that triangle cut out of his foot, and the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make it, just going to sew across the end of it. So you take the V, can you see, and then you open it like a mouth that way. So you put your finger in the hole there, and then you just close it. It's quite tricky to see because there's a lot of fleece here, but you just close it like that and then pin it, and then we're going to sew across it, and we'll do that on both feet. So when you are going to sew across the dart at the end of the foot, if you can open the seams out and make them lie as flat as you can, and then you'll be sewing quite a good 2 centimetres in. That's a lot of fabric to go through, so if you've got a walking foot, you may wish to use that. And you're going to have to also really flatten the fleece down to get it through the dog fleece here. You almost have to sort of push and pull it a little bit, really encourage it through. And we do secure with some reverse stitches. So that's the end of his foot, and then you can trim off this extra bit here, so you leave a good seam allowance of about 1 centimetre, 6 millimetres to 1 centimetre, and then we're doing the same with the other foot. So you open it out, so you've got the little hole, the mouth, and then you squeeze it like that, open the seams, really thumb push that seam open, and the one on the back there as well, and really just try and get the fleece to lie flat so that the machine will be able to sew across it. So the mouth's up there, and we're going to do a good distance to sew across. So about the same as the other ones, they match. If you reverse, really push the fleece down to help it go through smoothly. Secure with some reverse chop off the end that you don't need. And then we can also clip our curves whilst we're here, so don't snip through the stitching, but just help to cope with the amount of fleece on those curves under his arms as well. And just check that you're not going up through the actual stitching. And then we're almost ready for the stuffing. Just do this little leg one here as well. Okay, now we can start to turn him the right way round through the gap that we left in the back. So now we can start to turn him the right way round. So grab the end of his foot and carefully turn it round, and his next foot. Pull that through, and his paws, his other paw, and finally his head. And the ears are the really tricky bit, really tricky. So this is where we can see if we've left enough seam allowance to get his ears through. So once you've started to get in the right way round, I use a chopstick just to get those little paws out, push it into the gaps, and his feet, and that's the dart that we've just sewn across the foot there. Give him a bit of shape, and on the bottom. And now we need to work on the ears, so these can be quite tricky. There's a lot of fleece to come through a small gap, basically. So if you can, pull it from the outside, but I think I'm going to need to do these from the inside. So I'm just grabbing right the way down to the bottom of his ear, inside. I'm going to attempt to push it up with the chopstick. Slowly but surely, you can feel it's coming through. Trick is not to get it too wedged, so just give it a bit of a wiggle, a bit of space. Almost there. You can feel the bulk of the ear now coming through. There we go. And if you just want to make those corners a bit tighter, just push your stick through. So that's one, and then do the same on the other one. And if the worst comes to the worst, you can always undo some of the seam on the inside. Just make the hole a little bit bigger and re-secure the sort of stitches either side then by doing a couple of reverse stitches. but it might take a little bit of doing, but you should be able to get it through with a little wiggle. Use some space. It's coming. It's coming slowly. This is probably the hardest part to the whole project, actually, getting the ears through. Just loosen it up a little bit if it feels like it's getting a bit blocked. There. It's on its way. Almost there. There we go. Phew. Okay. I'll tell you what would have been really good actually is to trim. I can feel at the end here is quite a lot of fabric. So what I really recommend and should have done is to trim the ears before you turn them. So trim any surplus on the inside and clip around those ears. Okay, so we've got the ears through finally, and that's our little bunny. Now it just needs his stuffing. So once we've got the ears pulled through, next thing to do is we're going to sew a line across so that we don't stuff the ears. We just sew from there and there, and then the ears will fall down. So just do a straight line where you follow the line of his head and sew straight across there. So we've sewn the lines across the top of the ears, and now we need to stuff the bunny. So use stuffing of this kind of size, just a small handful, and start by poking it down to his extremities, so his paws. I'm starting with his feet, and you just get the same amount of padding each time, stuffing, and push it in. So it's not overstuffed. What you want to do is make sure that there's not much stuffing on the join of his leg so that it can be manoeuvred. So not too hard, just nice and soft. And again, down the other side to his other paw, using chopstick if you have one, or whatever else is handy that comes to hand. Okay, and keep stuffing in the same manner. So when you've put enough stuffing in for your bunny, his little paws, his arms, keep the stuffing free around his little joints, and then he will have a little ribbon around his neck, so that can also be a little bit floppy if you like. and then you've just got this gap at the back that we've stuffed him through. So what we're going to do is you pull it tight and just tuck it under like the rest of the seam allowance, and then we're going to just hand stitch, ladder stitch that shut, and then we can make his little tail. So he will sit nicely for you once that's all sewn up at the back. So I'm going to sew up our little bunny now. So start by getting needle and thread and push. Start from the inside, leave quite a tail, and to do a ladder stitch you just go in. It's going to be quite tricky to show on this fleece, but go in on one side, pick up the next side, and then go back in on the same side and pick up on that side. So the idea is you don't see much of the cotton, just the little stitches either side. And you go all the way along the seam, just keep folding. You can either pin it, might be easier if you pin it before you start sewing, or you can just hold it and do it. And again, because it's fleece, you're not really going to notice these stitches too much. Like that. And then sew all the way up in this manner until your little bunny is all finished. Bit of fluff on there. And then you've just got to add his tail, which is the circle that we cut out earlier. So for that you can use any of the surplus fleece that you've got, or if you've got any stuffing left, and you just will be using that to pad it out in the middle. So there will be a little bit of hand stitching, just very big basic stitches to draw in the circle, but I'll show you that on the next step. So I've stitched up the back, so now we're going to stitch the tail on. So with the tail you want to get the circular piece of fleece that you've cut out, and with needle and thread, hand needle and thread, you just need to tack all the way around the edge, and then what you're going to do is pull the pieces, pull the two threads together so you just form the little tail. And before you close it completely, you can just put some bits of the surplus fleece that you had left, or if you want, if you've got stuffing, then I'm just going to get some of this fleece that was left. So this was the fleece left over from the pattern, so I'm just going to cut it into smaller pieces and then see how many we need to stuff it. And this will just give the little tail a little bit of body. You don't want to pack it too much. Well, it's up to personal preference, but I think if it's too full and too heavy, it might just sort of fall off or be too weighted down. So you just push it in and pull it tight, and then sew it up. So you can tie the two ends together if you want to secure it first. Trying to do this, you can still see it on camera. You can do 3 knots in there, and then you can sew his little tail on. if you want to secure it a bit better. Just sew through all of that top kind of seam allowance, just to make sure it's not going to open up. And then sew it on, sort of flatten out the opening, and then sew it on his bottom. So make sure he'll still be able to sit down. So I'm just going to pop it on there so it won't push him over when he's sitting down. Just sew it through. Again, because it's fleece, it's very forgiving. It doesn't have to be tidy stitching at all. It just needs to be secure all the way around, like so. And we're almost there. Almost got your little Easter bunny ready. Put another stitch this side. And then tie it off with a thread. It's already there. Snip those. And there we have. All we've got left to do is to get his nice little ribbon and tie his ribbon on. Tie his little ribbon round his neck, and there is your finished Easter bunny. Well done. With his little pom-pom tail. Cute.